He just won his second American League MVP, but are the Red Sox a serious contender to land Shohei Ohtani? Find out on today's episode of Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and the current host of the Boston Balling podcast, and I am here for you Monday through Friday to talk all things Boston Red Sox, especially during this free agency season when things are really starting to ramp up. So you can find me every day on your favorite podcast feed for free. So if it's free, why not start your day with Locked On Red Sox? Thank you for making it your first listen of every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Hope you're off to a fantastic start to your Friday. I don't know why, but for some reason this week has felt so long, and we have finally made it to Friday and the weekend. I think for me, thinking about just the fact that the Thanksgiving holiday is next week, and I know I'm going to be getting more days off from work. So the anticipation leading up to that made this week feel longer, but hopefully your week has been good, especially with some of this Boston Red Sox news that we've been hearing about this week. So I'm going to be discussing it all on today's episode with a special guest who is also a very familiar face on Locked On Red Sox. If you have been tuning into the show for a while, and a lot of you everydayers would definitely know who this is, Jake Iggy. I am so excited to have you back on here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so happy to be back as well. Honestly, really miss talking Sox. Even with how rough the 2023 season ended, it's a lot of fun. You're looking into all these different storylines going into this offseason. New, Chief Baseball Officer Craig Breslow, Heim's out the door. So excited to see the Sox, start to become the Red Sox again, spend some money and start to be a real contender in this AL East again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been kind of a whirlwind of a couple months because they went and fired Chaim Bloom in what seemed kind of sudden, because I really didn't think they would do it when they did. I thought they would at least wait till the season was over, or maybe give him one more off season when they have the flexibility financially to go out and spend some more money on players, to see if he had the capability to do that. But obviously ownership got tired of it and said, we want to switch gears with what we're trying to do for this organization. So then they bring in Craig Breslow, who seems to be on a mission to really fulfill what the Red Sox want him to do and build a competitive roster for the 2024 season. And, I like a lot of what he can offer to this organization. I spent a lot of time on this show talking about the positives of having Breslow here. I think, his familiarity with Boston and just his familiarity with being in a different front office type of roles could really help him out a little bit. I think he's going to have some assistance at first, since he doesn't have the experience in this specific type of role. But I think it could be very good for the Red Sox and kind of representing a new chapter of Boston baseball.
I completely agree. And I think the former player aspect is one that is sometimes like underrated. And, it's kind of something that's pretty popular right now in the MLB. We obviously saw Chris Young with the Rangers, that GM, win a World Series recently. A lot of other guys have become, big candidates who were former players. Breslow, obviously now the chief baseball officer for one of the most prominent teams in the sport. It shows that, teams are shifting more towards former players. And, you brought it up with Breslow, had experience, obviously with the Sox for multiple years as a player, won a World Series here. And, I think with his introductory press conferences really helped you as a Red Sox fan get motivated about how this guy is going to really take, that mindset of understanding what it means to win a championship. And also, I think it could help them try and lure some of these top pitching free agents and, different trade candidates who they, the players might believe that Breslow could help them out, or he understands how to, continue to help them improve. I agree with you. I'm curious to see how, his inexperience maybe shows a little bit. Who knows how much experience he really has, negotiating some of these, major deals. We're talking about, maybe a Shohei Ohtani or a Yamamoto type deal, which is, $200 or $300 million. So curious to see sort of, what things we might see similar that he struggles with that Heim did. We heard a lot about Heim, having sort of closed mind, needing to, win every single deal. Breslow has sort of pushed back on sort of that mindset as well. But curious to really see his first move, what it is, and how he continues to follow those up throughout the offseason.
Yeah, the experience that he has of being a player and having that side of the game is definitely underrated. I think because he can offer his viewpoints on the game from different perspectives. If you have been in that same situation as some of these players coming in, he can probably evaluate these guys a little bit differently than somebody else might. So I think that's an advantage he has. And when it comes to making these major deals, the Red Sox do need to make a splash in free agency this year to start with, particularly from the pitching side. They need to get at least one, but ideally two high-end starting pitchers to add to this rotation, because I really like Brian Bayo and the development that he's shown, but he's simply not an ace yet. He's probably about a 3 right now. And if he can have a couple starting pitchers that are a little more high end than him right now, it kind of takes away from some of that pressure of him having to be the guy right now in that rotation, so he can start to focus on continuing to just develop the way that he has, and then hopefully eventually start to fill that role. But you did mention him already. He's obviously a highly anticipated guy. Nobody knows where he's going to go this offseason, but he just won his second American League MVP, which is completely well-deserved. I mean, his stats show it. What he's doing in Major League Baseball is something that is probably a once-in-a-generation thing that we will see. And I love him. Shohei Ohtani, there have been reports saying that basically he's down to 3 teams that he might want to go to, which is the Red Sox, Dodgers, and Rangers. Are you buying into that? Do you think there is a real possibility that the Red Sox can pull off negotiating a deal to get him in Boston?
I think that they'll definitely put the money down. I think that's for sure. I would not be surprised if, ultimately, we see Shohei Ohtani sign with the Rangers or sign with the Dodgers, and we see a report that the Red Sox were runner-ups. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw something like that. Now, I see them going towards him and sort of ignoring the, we've heard a lot of the speculation of they might not go after him due to, the DH spot already probably being filled, with Yoshida or, Justin Turner, and, how much durability are you really going to get from him? You brought it up. Nobody really knows where he's going to go. The amount of money he's looking for, the amount of years he's looking for as well. I've heard some people bring up the possibility, not like a definite, but it's an interesting thing to think about him, getting like a 2 to 3 year deal with his Tommy John surgery. And, if he gets a 2-year deal, then, trying to go out on the open market once again, now that he is able to show that he can fully pitch, because he's not going to be able to pitch in 2024. He's going to be obviously undergoing and recovering from Tommy John over this next season. But I think that it's going to come down to probably those 3 teams. And then, there always seems to be a mystery team that comes out of nowhere. But, we've also seen reports that he could try and sign before the winter meetings, which is honestly just 2 or 3 weeks away. So very curious to see how everything materializes. I don't think that we'll get a real gist on how close this is getting until, we see the Red Sox met with Shohei Ohtani and, his agent and, Craig Breslow are speaking, or, John Henry gets involved or something like that. So I think that there is a possibility that he, comes here. I think that it would be huge in terms of the notoriety of the team, what it is already. But, there's some people in and around the game who sort of have a dimmed down light on the Red Sox with the last two last place finishes and, not really being that Boston Red Sox type force that we saw them throughout, the beginning of the 2000s. And so I think Shohei would be able to bring a lot of notoriety to the team, what it was back in the 2010s and in the early 2000s, and also the excitement with the fan base as well.
Yeah, because that's a good point that you just brought up there is the fan base. People were really starting to lose interest, especially this past season. People were just not following the team as much as they typically would. And even, the attendance at the games was going down. And that's something that's important in the overarching picture of the Boston Red Sox being a successful 100%. Franchise, because the fans make you money. If they don't go to the games, then what are we really doing here? And a name like Ohtani could really tell fans that the Red Sox are serious about this, because everything's all talk until they actually do it and until it actually happens. And, Sam Kennedy can say what he wants to say about we want to compete now again. But what does that really mean to them? And what does that look like to them? And I think the fan base lost a lot of their trust. They just don't trust that front office as of right now. And when they did fire Heim and brought in Breslow, that to me showed, okay, they are serious about making some sort of change here, but they need to be serious enough to be willing to spend money on players like that. And I think if they were to somehow get Ohtani to come to Boston, that could turn fans back into the right direction in terms of their attitudes and feelings about this franchise right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think even if you saw a report and the Red Sox didn't sign, let's say, Shohei Ohtani, but you did see a report that they did put down, upwards of 200 to 300 million, or even $4. I think fans would be happy to see the effort. That was one thing that I think really hurt them with, Bogarts and even Lester way back when, you heard the actual numbers come out that they were offering, and you're like, that's an incredible low ball. Like we're really going to low ball, somebody in a homegrown talent too, and somebody that, fans loved. But, Shohei's a whole different story. And I think this would start a precedent, and a good precedent that, the Red Sox are back to really putting money down on the table, to where that wasn't really sort of the narrative over the last 4 years. And, where the Red Sox and Yankees are the two, and, now the Dodgers, obviously, but are the other three, three-headed monsters who are always going to throw a lot of money at some of the top free agents. And I think the Red Sox need to get back to that place.
Yeah, they need to be back in that conversation as one of those teams that people know are going to be in the running for a player like that. And, Ohtani, he could do like what you said and be willing to take a lesser deal so he can prove to teams that he can stay healthy and that he can pitch effectively again, because you do run that risk of, is he going to be the same pitcher when he comes back in 2025? Is the time away going to be too much to the point where he can't get back to the place he was in? Or is he even going to be able to stay healthy enough to pitch as effectively as we've seen him pitch? So I think there is going to be that initial hesitation of, is he ever going to get back to that place as a pitcher, or are we paying him primarily to be a DH? And so that's where he's going to have to show teams, hey, like, I'm here and I can still pitch. And maybe that does mean that he's okay with settling for a 2-year deal or something like that, giving himself through 2025 to show that he can stay healthy and pitch effectively. And then he goes back on the market or looks for an extension with where he's at.
Right. And I think, obviously with Ohtani, a lot of people bring up the Yoshida connection. I think that definitely plays a factor. I know anytime you bring up, the possibility of the Sox signing Ohtani, the big money sort of figure in people's minds sometimes gives them anxiety of, the 40 to $50 million. But, one thing that we've seen with Ohtani, at least when he does have money, being talked about, he's never a guy who, with the Angels that was trying to, strong arm them to give him 30 or $40 million. Right before he had Tommy John surgery the first time, he settled for arbitration and then, got the $30 million right after he won MVP and, signed a 2-year sort of arbitration deal of $30 million when he knew he was probably worth much, much more than that. And he probably could have gotten much more than that from the Angels. So everything that we've heard from, people who know him or are speculating about what he's going to do, talk about that the comfortability of the spot that he's going to be playing in or the organization is much bigger to him rather than, the amount of money figure that you're putting down on the table.
Yeah, environment is definitely a huge factor. And, I would be hard pressed to believe that the Yoshida connection won't have anything to do with or play into his decision at all, because that's somebody who could make him feel comfortable coming to Boston and somebody who he can, relate to and already has a relationship with. And that's important for a player too, because sometimes people forget like, oh, he's just going to go where the money takes him, but that might not always be the case for him because he wants to be in an environment where he overall feels comfortable, and maybe overall based on the teams that he's most interested in, what if Boston is the one that he feels like he could see himself being the most comfortable playing? That could be what is the deciding factor for him.
Right. And we could probably see him ask a lot of people like Yoshida, what has their experience been in Boston? And who knows how much the connection of the Red Sox and Japanese player in the past could definitely help. Daisuke, who knows? He's definitely a prominent figure still over in Japan. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohtani has some sort of relationship with him. So very curious to see how it all plays out and, really how much money they're going to allocate towards like some of these big free agents like an Ohtani, like an Aaron Nola, like a Blake Snell.
Yeah, exactly. Only time will tell, but I'm sure Craig Breslow has something up his sleeve, and I would be hard-pressed again to believe that he won't at least try to get him to come here. But coming up, we're going to be talking about some other news that took place among Red Sox Twitter this week that could be another potential reason for Ohtani wanting to come to Boston. So stay tuned because you definitely won't want to miss that. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and who sits. I'm thankful for that connection we have, and today I want our chat to be a little more personal. Whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend. Thanks to our partners at Jase Medical, life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply, even ED generics for Cialis, Viagra, and Revasio prescriptions. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you would love to get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily medication, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. It definitely can never hurt to have that extra peace of mind there. And also some other big news. Locked On has actually launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. So basically what this is Locked On Sports Today is bringing you 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day with all of the local experts here at the Locked On Network. Plus, our national shows will be covering every league. So just go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This is absolutely huge for us here at Locked On. Everybody here is very excited about it. We have some great hosts here who will keep you in the loop. every single day, 24 hours a day. So subscribe to that today. And also don't forget that SiriusXM is also your friend. You can download the app and search Red Sox, and you can get the home broadcast of every game. So you don't have to miss a single game. And especially if Shohei Ohtani is in a Boston Red Sox uniform in 2024, you certainly won't want to miss any of the action, as he will probably help bring the Red Sox back to being a playoff contending team. So you should do that today as well. And speaking of Shohei Ohtani, the Red Sox are in need of pitching this offseason. At the end of the day, it's just the reality. It was the biggest glaring weakness on the 2023 roster. Although Ohtani can't pitch in 2024, he could help be part of that solution in 2025. But the Boston Red Sox decided to fire their pitching coach, Dave Bush, which was a much needed move in Boston. And rumor has it they are close to bringing in Andrew Bailey from the San Francisco Giants as the new pitching coach in Boston. If that were to be the case, Jake, how do you feel about him? Do you feel like he's somebody who can do this job effectively and help get the Red Sox pitching staff on the right track?
Yeah, without a doubt. And one thing to note is, Andrew Bailey and Craig Breslow spent 5 years together as teammates with the A's and the and the Red Sox, and they're extremely close. And they actually started and are board members of the Strike Three Foundation. So I think it really helps that they already have that connection. And especially with Breslow getting interviews with the Orioles and Marlins for the pitching coach, and then with the Yankees as a bench coach, really shows he's a sought after type, coach that used to be a player, has the experience from his time with the Giants, really being able to revolutionize sort of their pitching department and help a lot of guys like Carlos Rodon, Kevin Gausman, really be able to turn around their careers. We saw Gausman, a Cy Young candidate this year, has been one of the best pitchers for the Blue Jays over the last few years. Carlos Rodon had his best season of his entire career with the Giants and fell flat on his face when he went to the Yankees. So I think, the biggest thing with what we saw over the last 4 years, and you could even say, back when, Clay Buchholz and John Lester were coming up through the system, the Red Sox have never really had a great infrastructure for being able to develop young pitchers. And we especially saw it over the last few years with these different pitchers not being able to get the best out of them, and seeing these guys being tabbed as like a Brian Mata, a Brandon Walter, different guys like that being tabbed as starting pitching prospects, and then ultimately settling in the bullpen or not getting up to the real potential that most people put on them. And so I think especially with what Bailey has been able to do with the Giants is really telling. And it sort of connects with what we've all talked about with Breslow, what he was able to do with the Cubs, really being able to help a guy like Justin Steele look at what can he improve on in terms of his pitches, and really trying to revolutionize how you look at being able to develop a pitcher. And I think as well, Bailey being able to come back with the Red Sox is a really cool opportunity for him. He also spoke about after, his playing days, his dream was to be able to be a pitching coach. And so it makes sense maybe why he didn't want to go towards a bench coach role with the Yankees. But, I think the Sox are getting a great, pitching coach in Andrew Bailey, a guy who understands what it means to pitch in Boston, and also a guy who struggled a little bit in his career and also had some really highs in his career. If you remember, right before the Red Sox traded for him from the A's, he was a rookie of the year, and obviously didn't pitch as well as most expected him to as a closer for the Red Sox. He's able to help those guys not only develop as a player on the field but also off the field. And I think especially some of those younger guys, his trials and tribulations that he experienced as a player, he's able to use that to help those guys mentally be able to ultimately be the best MLB player that they could be.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have somebody who understands the ups and downs that come with being a pitcher in Major League Baseball. And that can really apply for anything that comes to really any job. Like, you want somebody who's able to relate to being in that job and understands the challenges that may come with that. And he's experienced those challenges. I mean, he got injured and was sidelined and then had to miss the rest of the 2013 season, and then was able to come back from his injury, pitch in a few more places. So for guys who maybe do face an injury during the season, being able to have somebody with them who can connect to something like that and can help them through that and keep that mentality of staying positive and overcoming that injury is such an important thing. And I think when it comes to the Red Sox and where they're at right now, they are looking for pitchers who can come in and make an immediate impact. And in order for them to come in and make an immediate impact, I think it's so important for them to have a pitching coach who they feel like they can connect to and can get to know them individually, what works for them, what doesn't. Because as a pitching coach, you really do need to understand your guys and what works for some guys and what works for others, because everybody ultimately is going to be different. And, some pitchers might be better at one thing, or the way they prep themselves for games might be a little bit different than what another pitcher does. And I feel like if they bring in somebody like Andrew Bailey, something I could see him being really good at is understanding that and being able to differentiate one pitcher on his staff from another and say, hey, this is what Brian Bayo likes to do to prep for his starts, and this is what Tanner Houck likes to do to prep for his, and really honing in on what those individual things are that makes them feel like they're best prepped for their individual outings. And the other thing I like about him too is what you said. There were a lot of other teams interested in him this offseason, and that goes to show that he has a good track record. And the Red Sox really had no choice but to get it right with this hire. They needed to bring in somebody who can really help fix this pitching staff, because that, again, was the biggest detriment to their success in 2023 and even the past couple seasons, really. They really had no choice but to get this right with this hire. And the fact that Bailey, could have taken a bench coach role, but he probably feels more in his element as a pitching coach, because that is what he did. He was a pitcher and he understands that environment of being at Fenway and how it could be tough to pitch in front of that Fenway crowd sometimes, and being able to help some of these younger guys who are trying to work their way up. Maybe some of these players who we saw get some, short outings, short stints in 2023 that might be part of the future of the pitching staff, help them to kind of get more acclimated to pitching in Boston, I think is so important. And there's a lot of boxes I feel like he checks off when it comes to having that connection with the pitchers.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, this is a really critical time for the Red Sox, pitching environment, with Garrett Whitlock, Tanner Houck, Josh Winkowski, Brian Bayo, even Brandon Walter, Chris Murphy, Brian Mata, all these different guys in really critical parts of their careers. They're really at a crossroads with a lot of these guys of are you going to be a starting pitcher or are you going to be a bullpen arm? And obviously with Whitlock and Houck, they've really played around with them over the last 2 years. And, we've seen that turn into injuries and surgeries for both players. And, especially with a guy like Garrett Whitlock, you just really got to figure out what you got in him. And, if a guy like Bailey's able to figure out a way for him to find that magic that he had back in 2021 and turn it into that of a starter, I think that is a huge win for you. You already have a lot of investment in Garrett Whitlock. I think the most he gets paid through that 4-year deal is around $10 million. But if you're able to fully take advantage of that deal, I think that's best. Tanner Houck, another guy as well. But even for some of those players who are in that transition of, not being a viable MLB starter, but being a really good reliever, like, we saw with Josh Winkowski, ultimately, Chris Murphy, Brandon Walter, and I think Brian Mata, we could definitely see him become a reliever rather than a starter, especially with what we saw from his struggles last year in AAA. Bailey's a perfect guy to be able to help those pitchers be able to transition. He was a relief pitcher. He was a dominant closer. And so being able to help those guys understand the differences of preparation, especially in the offseason, from a bullpen arm to a starter, I think is really critical. And, that relationship with him and Breslow, with their smarts and their ability to understand pitchers from their own experiences, and also helping these other guys turn their careers around and really being able to get the best out of them, I think is going to be really critical. We saw with Dave Bush, a lot of different players not really get to the development place that most people hoped. I think a big teller is, and this is a guy that Lauren and I, kind of crapped on a lot when we hosted the show, was Ryan Brazier. But, he shoved. He was one of the best pitchers in the second half. Yeah, when he went to LA, it was like a magic in a bottle. And,
I was
Bush
like,
was
who
able
is
to,
this guy?
yeah,
What did they do to him? Because like he was not good in Boston, and now all of a
not at
sudden he's
all.
like lights out every time.
It's crazy. And, you gotta sort of, guess, put that on Bush. He had all this time to figure out, what did the Dodgers figure out in that month time or that few week time that Bush didn't see? So I think this could be huge for just the Red Sox, just pitching department in general. And, all I thought about when I saw, that report is, man, if this team becomes a pitching powerhouse, like we've seen the Rays, the Indians, the Dodgers become, watch out.
Yeah, because we know they can hit. That was never really been the issue, and they just needed the pitching. And I'm interested in seeing how he can work with a guy like Brian Bayo, who's really at that point now where a lot of eyes were on him in 2023 because he was expected to be that guy because they didn't really have a number one. So he was the Red Sox, best starter in 2023. And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody like him who's still trying to kind of figure himself out. But I'm interested in seeing how Bailey would work with him because he did struggle during his daytime starts significantly. So, what was it about those that were different from his nighttime starts? Was it because his routine was cut short a little bit more, so he couldn't feel like he was fully prepped for his starts? I feel like Bailey could help hone in on figuring out how he can be more effective to prep for those types of outings because he is going to have to improve during day games because it was like night and day how he looked at night compared to during the day. It was weird. But I think this Andrew Bailey hire, and I did say it on Twitter too, would be a massive win for Boston. And I think he'd be right in his element because pitching is his area of expertise.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, especially with Brian Bayo, if we're able to see what he was able to do in the beginning of the season, if he's able to tap into that, 162, I think that's going to be incredible. Very curious to see how even the guys, you pay the big money, like maybe a Jordan Montgomery and Aaron Nola, even Yamamoto. I think being able to have guys in the head sort of chairs like a Bailey in terms of the pitching department and Breslow being able to fully maximize your investment. I think a lot of times when we see the Red Sox put a lot of money down on free agents, Carl Crawford and Adrian Gonzalez, even like a David Price at the beginning of the time when the Sox signed him, you didn't get the most out of your investment. And I think being able to have those guys there to really be able to help these guys flourish the most that they can, I think is really critical. And then, I'm very curious to see what they do with the rotation. I think you got to have Bayo as the number 4 to 5 starter, and you got to have the rest of it filled in with some really viable guys. If you really want to go towards an ALDS or an ALCS, you got to change things around. But I mean, I wouldn't be super upset if it was, Sale 3, Bayo 4, maybe Pavetta 5. But I think that is something that is going to be very critical on how you're really going to fill out your rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a combination of guys that could fill that 5th spot. And it's just a matter of who do they see being in that role
Right.
versus who do they feel is a better fit in the pen. I mean, I've always liked Whitlock better in the bullpen. I think his best stuff comes when he is relieving games as opposed to starting games. I don't know necessarily that the Red Sox agree with me on that, but it's it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they play around with that and how they decide to fill out that rotation. But no choice, got to go out and spend money on at least 2 high-end starters that can be a no doubt number 1 and number 2 because it's been a while since this team has had a true ace in the rotation. So it would be nice to say they have a number 1 starter again, because I've been waiting to say that for a while. But coming up, I'm going to be talking about 2024 expectations. What do we think their record's going to be in 2024? Jake and I are going to be giving our predictions for the Red Sox record at the end of the season, so you definitely won't want to miss it. But just a reminder quickly that you could get Locked On Red Sox Monday through Friday on your favorite podcast platform for free. We are the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make it your first listen of every day. Continue to like and subscribe. Leave a review. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at GabbyHurlbut10. And I've enjoyed interacting with a lot of different people, talking about the team, especially now in the off season. We, have less to talk about because it's not as busy. But if you want to be the first one to know what's going on with everything free agency and the Red Sox, I am here every day. You can start your day off with this show. And also don't forget to download the SiriusXM app because you can start your day with Locked On Red Sox and end your day with the broadcast. I mean, I understand we're all adults. We have real responsibility. If you don't have time to sit and watch the game in full every day for 3 hours, you can still feel like you're a part of it. Maybe you want to clean your kitchen and also listen to the game so that you can still feel like you're involved with what's going on. So definitely download the SiriusXM app while you're leaving a review on Locked On Red Sox as we speak, which I know you are on your phone, because it's going to be a fun 2024 season for sure. You absolutely will not want to miss any of the action. And also don't forget that Locked On also now has a 24/7 streaming channel for national sports coverage. This is very exciting. Nobody else does this. Locked On is the first network to have this. So all you have to do is subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and there will be 24/7 coverage of all of the top sports stories of the day with our local Locked On experts who follow these teams religiously and can provide you with the best content on everything going on. If you want to be the first to know, go to YouTube and subscribe to Locked On Sports Today because you definitely won't want to miss that. It's a great feature that is very unique to Locked On. Speaking of the 2024 Red Sox season, high expectations now because they say they want to win now. They're bringing in some new leadership to hopefully kind of fix some of the problems that this team has had the last few years, hopefully get them back to being a team that can really compete. So, Jake, based on everything we talked about, we talked about some big names here. Maybe they land some of those names. Maybe they, they do go out and they sign Ohtani, or maybe they sign Yamamoto, and say they do everything right in the offseason. They go out and they sign some big name players and they really improve their pitching staff. What would you say would be kind of, just the standard for number of wins for 2024? Where's kind of that bar at for you?
Yeah, I was going in between like 93 and 95. I think 95 is what you got to like shoot for. That's in my opinion like a pretty reasonable ask, especially with the AL East. I could come out here and say 100 wins, but I don't think a lot of teams who have barely gotten over the 80 mark over the last 2 years have really been able to do that. Obviously we saw what the Rangers and the Diamondbacks were able to do and ultimately get to the World Series. Crazier things have happened, but I think that 95
the Orioles had compared to where they were a couple
exactly.
seasons ago. It's kind of nuts to think about, but
it is crazy. And I think that they're going to win the division once again. I think that we could see the Orioles be up at the top again. I think the 95 number, the reason why I picked it is I think you got to get up to that number to be able to be better than the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and the Rays. I think we could see the Rays take a step back this next year, but they always find a way to sneak up. I don't really have high hopes in the Yankees, but they are going to try and spend once again after a disappointing season. The Blue Jays, I don't really see much changing, especially with the same guys in the same positions that were last year. I think that it's going to be the insanity type thing, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I think you could definitely see the Red Sox win 95 games and come in second place and clinch the wild card. I think that's something that is definitely reasonable. Especially if they go out there and get 2 frontline starters. What we saw from the Zach Wheeler and the Aaron Nola tandem over the last 2 years for the Phillies, absolutely dominating. And even with what we saw the Rangers do, they even though they went out and spent a lot of money on pitching, they didn't have a Scherzer or a DeGrom at the top of their rotation. They had and Nathan Eovaldi, and different guys being able to fill in and be serviceable. But I think as well with this team, very curious to see sort of what happens at second base, outfield as well. Are you going to trade Verdugo? I think there's a lot of factors that go into if this team is able to win over 90 games. I think a lot of different things got to happen. But, especially if they go out there, spend the money, make some creative trades, and don't dumpster dive like we've seen over the last 4 years and hope and pray that if you put some guys in different positions or you're going to get a bounce back candidate. I don't think that's the way that you should continue to go towards. But I think this is a great opportunity in 2024 for this team to really be able to set the groundwork for what the next core is going to be. And then ultimately hopefully have a Marcelo Meyer be able to slot into that shortstop position, maybe a Kyle Teal slot into that catcher position. Then the rest is sort of like already filled out. And, I think too, something else, Chris Sale, he's another guy that's going to be very interesting to see what happens this next season. Could you see him potentially get traded at the trade deadline since his contract is up after this year? So I think the 95 win range is pretty much the totem pole for me.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want a Corey Kluber 2.0 situation in the starting rotation in 2024. No taking chances on players like Corey Kluber anymore, because that was just a disaster and all around with that. But yeah, I mean, if Chris Sale can stay healthy, that would be nice. But yeah, I mean, there's a possibility they try to move him. It could be hard for a team to want to take him on since he misses a lot of time during the season now, which is really unfortunate because obviously we appreciate Chris Sale when he was prime Chris Sale. But yeah, there's a lot of holes that they need to fill out as this offseason progresses. But yeah, I mean, I'm setting that bar at 90 wins and hopefully they can overachieve that and win more games than that. But I think it'll absolutely by far be a better season than 2023.
100%. And I think, especially with the energy that they have going into this next season, I think that you're going to get a lot of excitement at spring training, which we've been kind of yearning for. Seems like Alex Cora has a little bit of a different tone and energy now that there's a new regime, sort of like a new mindset as well. And I think, too, I'm very curious to see who the new leaders are to really step up. Are we going to see a Trevor Story be that guy? If you don't have Justin Turner, you got to find somebody who's going to be that veteran voice in that clubhouse. And, very excited to see how the young guys continue to progress as well. Bayo, a Cassis, a Duran, maybe even Rafaela too. And Will Abreu is another guy that I think, some people forget. We could definitely see him play a prominent role in this upcoming season. So there's a lot of question marks, sort of like, Lauren and I always said last offseason, a lot of question marks, a lot of potential. But we're not going to know until opening day or maybe even halfway through the season how good this team is really going to be, no matter how many moves or how much money they spend.
Exactly. We're all putting our faith in Craig Breslow here, our new guy in charge here. He can truly formulate his legacy based on this specific offseason here. So, like I always tell you, Red Sox fans, don't panic. It's all going to be okay. Regardless of what happens, it'll be okay. The Red Sox will be okay. They will be a better team than they were in 2023. I can at least promise you that. So just keep the faith with that. Go Red Sox. Jake, thank you so much for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure. And it was so nice to have, a familiar face back on the show.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you having me on, Gabby. And, everybody who listened or who's listening and watching right now, who supported Lauren and I over the year and a half that we did together, really appreciate you guys continuing to tune in for Gabby and, really cherish my time at Locked On Red Sox and really do miss talking Sox. So grateful to come on.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a great weekend. Go Red Sox, and I will catch you next time.